Sienna, I want a divorce, Xander suddenly said as I was doing the dishes. His words hit me out of nowhere, leaving me stunned.
What?
Why? I asked, trying to make sense of the situation. Xander's response came quick. I'm about to inherit $6 million. It's a lot of money, but it's mine, and I'm not planning on sharing it with you. I couldn't understand why he was talking about a divorce just because of some money. What does that have to do with anything? I asked, confused. The truth is, I only stayed with you for the money. Your paycheck isn't much, but it's better than nothing. So I put up with this marriage. But now, with this $3 million, I don't need you anymore. I want to live a carefree life on my own, so let's just end this, he said, bluntly. I stayed quiet for a moment, letting his words sink in. Then I simply said, fine. If you're that sure, then sell the house. It'll take care of the mortgage too. Xander looked surprised. He probably expected a fight, but I was tired. This was my way out of the draining life I had been living. I grabbed some papers and slammed them onto the table in the living room, feeling a sense of finality. Let me tell you a bit about myself. My name is Sienna. I love kids and work as a preschool teacher. I met Xander, who's 2 years older than me, through a mutual friend. We've been married for nearly 8 years now. We bought this house thinking we'd start a family soon. Back then, I believed we had a bright future ahead of us. But not long after we tied the knot, Xander's attitude changed. He became obsessed with money. Before we got married, he always told me how great my job was. But that changed, and soon he started belittling me. Sienna, all you do is play with kids all day while I'm working my butt off. You've got it easy. People like you are freeloaders, he'd say. And soon, that became his favorite insult. Being a preschool teacher isn't easy. Every child is different, and we're responsible for their well-being. But Xander didn't care about that. He never listened. His words would sting, and I often cried alone, feeling helpless. The reason we never had kids? That was all Xander too. Anytime I mentioned wanting children, he'd shoot it down. If you've got time to think about kids, you should be working more. We've got a mortgage, taxes. What are you even thinking? His voice would rise, and I'd stay quiet, feeling like I had no say in my own life. Sure, Xander earned more than me, but it wasn't by much. His paycheck was only a few thousand more than mine, yet he acted like it made him so much more important.
He'd always hold it over my head.
Meanwhile, I took pride in my job, and his constant criticisms cut deep. It was humiliating, and it made me question my worth. To make things worse, he started wanting more time alone. I could live by myself, you know, he'd remind me. But I've stuck around out of necessity. Don't forget that. His constant belittling made me wonder if something had changed at work. He was working longer hours, doing more overtime, yet his salary didn't seem to be increasing. I knew this because I managed our finances. He wasn't bringing in more money, despite all his complaints. Maybe that's what made him so angry, because he started lashing out more often. One day, after another one of his rants, he exploded, angrier than I had ever seen him before. Who do you think makes this lifestyle possible? If I wanted to, I could leave you in a second. Be prepared, he said, his voice filled with venom. Xander wasn't always like this. Before we got married, he was kind and supportive. But after that outburst, things between us got worse. We barely talked anymore. The distance between us grew, and I felt more alone than ever. Then came Thanksgiving. We visited Xander's parents, and as we sat around the table, his mother brought up a topic I had been thinking about for years. You've been married for 8 years now, right? Sienna, I remember you used to say you wanted kids soon. Have you decided how many you want? Finally, I thought, a chance to talk about this openly. But before I could respond, Xander jumped in. Mom, we're not having kids. Sienna and I have talked about it, and we've decided not to. I was shocked. What? That's not true. I started to say, but Xander cut me off, lying through his teeth. Yeah, she hates the idea of having kids. She says it's enough dealing with them at work. Wait, what are you talking about? I tried to explain, but Xander just kept talking. Mom, can you please stop bringing it up? It's stressful for Sienna too. His mother nodded, clearly uncomfortable. Well, If that's what you've decided, that's fine, she said, before leaving the room. In the car on the way home, I confronted him. Why would you say that? I love children and want to have them. You're the one who's always saying no. Xander shrugged. We can't afford a child because you don't work full-time. Once you start making as much as me, we can talk. Until then, don't bother. I felt my heart sink. I thought preschool teachers earn more. What a letdown, he added, shaking his head. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Xander went on, laughing. From the start, I never wanted kids. They're just too expensive, and I'd rather spend that money on myself. I sat there in silence, shocked by his words. Everything he said made me feel small, worthless. At that moment, I realized just how broken our relationship was. Zaria's father seemed like a very polite man, but I didn't feel comfortable sharing my personal issues with him, especially since they were so embarrassing. These weren't problems I could easily talk about. However, Zaria was persistent. Miss Sienna, I can tell something's bothering you. You should talk to my dad, Zaria said with genuine concern. I smiled, trying to ease her worries.
Thank you, Zaria.
I really appreciate your concern, but some things are hard to talk about, even with someone close. Her father gently chimed in. I understand. It's tough to open up, but my daughter is really worried about you. If there's anything going on, please let me help. To my surprise, he handed me his business card, and when I looked at it, I saw his title. That moment felt like a turning point for me. It was then that I made the decision to take revenge on Xander. I wasn't going to let him walk all over me anymore. Just as I was preparing for my next steps, Xander came to me out of the blue. Hey, how about we get a divorce? He asked casually, as if he were discussing what to have for dinner. It had been a while since Xander came home early, and we were sitting down to eat together. My hands, busy washing dishes, froze mid-motion. Maybe he thought I was caught off guard by his sudden proposal because he grinned smugly. You might not like it, but my mind is made up, he said, looking far too pleased with himself. May I ask why? I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Well, I've got a huge sum of money coming my way. Do you want to know how much? $6 million. That's right, $3 million, Xander said, even though I hadn't asked for any details. He just kept talking, his excitement obvious. I've stayed with you because, well, your paycheck isn't much, but it's better than nothing. But now that I've got $3 million, I don't need you anymore. Let's end this quickly. You're probably tired of being a leech anyway. The words stung, but I didn't let it show. Where did all that money come from? I asked, feeling suspicious. That's none of your business. We're strangers now, he replied coldly. All right, I understand. Let's separate then, I said without hesitation. Xander was clearly taken aback by how easily I agreed. I guess he thought I'd beg him to stay, or cause a scene. I'm not planning on staying in this tiny house any longer, he continued. I'm thinking of using the money to move into a mansion, so I'm selling this house too. That's fine, I said, feeling a strange sense of relief. I'll start looking for an apartment. You can take care of the mortgage on this house, right? Yeah, I'll pay it off. That's only fair, Xander muttered, sounding like he was doing me a huge favor. After all, I'm the one with the money now. Thanks, that would be great, I said, staying calm, though a storm of emotions was brewing inside me. That was the moment I decided to act. I began packing, searching for a new place to live, and setting up my escape. The days became busy as I planned my move and prepared for my future, free from Xander's toxic presence. When the divorce process was almost finalized, I set up a meeting with Xander to go over the details. I'll leave the mortgage payments to you, Xander, I said, sliding a document across the table. I don't want any arguments later about what was said or not, so I've written everything down. Please sign this agreement. Fine, Xander huffed. As long as you don't start complaining about it later. I held back my frustration as he added yet another unnecessary remark, as if he couldn't help but be condescending. It was infuriating, but I stayed composed. As he skimmed through the agreement, his eyes stopped on one section. Wait, what's this about alimony? Why should I be the one paying? If anything, you should be the one paying since you don't work full-time. I stayed calm, even though his arrogance made my blood boil. You thought you could get away with this, didn't you? You're so naive, I said, sliding some documents across the table. Xander's face paled as he looked at them. Thanks for all the overtime you've been working lately, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. You must really love your job, don't you, Xander? Or should I say, you love spending time with your mistress? I laid down a photograph in front of him. It showed Xander with another woman, looking far too cozy together. This woman is just a junior colleague. We're not doing anything. You're trying to set me up, he stammered, trying to defend himself. Oh, really? I said, handing him another photo. This one of Xander and the same woman entering a hotel together. Still want to deny it? For some reason, instead of admitting defeat, he got even angrier. This has to be fake. Do you know how advanced photo editing is these days? You really think you can trick me with this? I sighed, realizing he wasn't going to admit to anything easily. But I had anticipated this. This isn't something I put together, I said, standing up. I think they'll be here soon.
Just then, the doorbell rang.
Xander looked nervous, clearly not knowing what to expect. I opened the door and led my guests into the living room. This is my attorney, I introduced him. The evidence was gathered by a private investigator, so there's no chance it's fake. If you doubt it, we can call them right now. My lawyer, with a confident smile, turned to Xander. I'm here to assist with the divorce proceedings. If you have any questions about the photographs, feel free to ask. Xander's face went pale, and he started to panic. His claims of working overtime had been a lie. The investigator found out that he wasn't staying late at the office. He was leaving on time and spending his nights with his mistress. That's why his income hadn't changed, despite all his so-called overtime. Finally, everything made sense. Xander's recent obsession with wanting to be alone had nothing to do with needing space. He was seeing someone else, and he was too arrogant to think he'd ever get caught. The private detective I hired was highly skilled, and it was all thanks to Zarya. Her father, as it turns out, is the CEO of a well-known company. When Zarya said her dad was a superhero, she wasn't exaggerating. After hearing about my situation, he immediately contacted a private detective agency and introduced me to a lawyer. At first, I thought it was overkill, but the more I uncovered about Xander, the angrier I became. That's when I decided to go all in. You think you're so clever, Xander sneered. You want alimony? Fine, I'll give it to you. I've got $6 million. I can afford it. Now, if we're done here, leave. I never want to see your face again. I would have left even if you hadn't said that. From now on, if anything comes up, we'll talk through the lawyer. Don't contact me directly. Who would ever want to see you? Xander spat out his final words. I packed my things in silence and left the house. Xander's arrogance never ceased to amaze me, even in the final moments of our marriage. I thought my chapter with Xander was closed, but a few months after settling into my new apartment, something unexpected happened. While I was adjusting to my new life, Xander reappeared. My stress had vanished after the divorce, and though the end of my marriage had been shocking at first, I felt nothing but relief. I didn't love him anymore. Then, one day, Xander showed up at my apartment, banging on the door and yelling, "Please listen to me." Reluctantly, I let him in. What do you want? I've told you I don't want anything to do with you anymore. Xander had the audacity to smirk as he glanced around my apartment. You've got a nice place here. If there are 2 rooms, I'll move into 1. We can live together again, right? What are you talking about? I said, disgusted. There's no way I'm living with a stranger. Don't be so cold. We were married once, remember? We're legally strangers now, I said firmly. What do you want? Xander's expression turned pitiful. I need you, Sienna. I realized that I made a mistake. You were always the best thing for me. I was confused. You were living in a mansion with your mistress, Xander. You didn't need me then. That was just a moment of confusion, he pleaded. I need you, Sienna. You still love me, right? I stared at him, completely bewildered by his desperation. Didn't you tell me you didn't need me anymore, because you were getting $6 million? Why don't you go find another wife with all that money? Xander started to cry. I thought I'd won the lottery. I thought I had $3 million, but I misread the numbers. I jumped the gun, and now I've got nothing.
I was too stunned to speak.
I was looking for an excuse to leave you. I thought with 3 million, I could do whatever I wanted. I badmouthed my boss and quit my job, thinking I was set for life. But when I found out I had no money, my mistress left me. Now I have nothing, no job, no money, no home. It was clear now that Xander had been abandoned, and he had nowhere to turn. Sienna, you're my only hope, he begged, tears streaming down his face. I can't pay the loan on the house, and I have nowhere to live. I told you I don't know anything about that. If you stay here any longer, I'll take legal action, I warned. Don't forget the agreement you signed during the divorce. If you break your promise, I'll claim 5 times the alimony. That's enough, Xander shouted, his face contorted with anger. He raised his hand as if he were about to hit me. Are you seriously going to hit me? I asked, my voice steady. If you lay a hand on me, I'll call the cops immediately. There are security cameras in this apartment complex. Even if you run, your face will be caught on video. Xander's face turned pale at my words. Get out now, or I'll report you for trespassing. At the mention of a report, he fled. I heard the sound of him stumbling down the stairs, but I simply shut the door, indifferent to his fate. Xander never came back after that. Later, Xander's parents visited me to apologize. They hadn't realized how bad things had gotten. When I asked about Xander, they told me that he'd fractured his leg falling down the stairs that day and had to be hospitalized for 2 months. His medical bills piled up, and on top of that, he still had the mortgage and alimony to pay. Desperate, he begged his old boss to let him work remotely, but his resignation had been so rude that they refused to rehire him. His parents even had to help cover the alimony, and Xander was left scrambling to find work. Once everything had settled down, I visited Zaria's house. Her father greeted me warmly. I've always wanted to meet you.
Zaria talks about you all the time.
I didn't expect us to meet under these circumstances, but I'm glad everything has been resolved. I smiled, feeling grateful for the support that had come my way. Zaria's father truly had been my superhero after all. I just made a few calls. I'm glad it worked out, Zaria's father said with a modest smile. Zaria chimed in, beaming. I'm so happy to see Miss Sienna smiling again. I felt a deep wave of gratitude wash over me. Zaria and her father had truly been life changers. My husband had looked down on me for being a preschool teacher, but it was my job that had shaped me into the person I am today. Through this experience, I realized the importance of cherishing every encounter and relationship in life. With renewed purpose, I smiled to myself. I loved my job more than ever and felt determined to keep doing my best, both for myself and for the children I taught. It was time to move forward, stronger than before.